Prime Minister Scott Morrison speaking there in Canberra just in the last hour or so. And Liz Kupsch is with the Stronger, Smarter Institute and she joins us now from Brisbane. Liz Kupsch, welcome. So what do you think of the worth of having this Closing the Gap report each year, and what do you think of where we're at now?
I think it's very important for all Australians to know what Closing the Gap is happening in Closing the Gap. I probably would reiterate the words that Bill Shorten was talking about the partnership. There needs to be real partnership that needs to occur with it, and I would also agree with the wording Closing the Gap is really that deficit language, and we shouldn't be concentrating on deficit language. We should be looking at strength-based approaches. Yeah,
so your focus is education. The Prime Minister says he wants to make Indigenous education his priority. That's what he's going to focus on out of all of this. So he's announced $200 million for funding for support for Indigenous secondary students and waiving HECS for teachers who commit to 4 years in an Indigenous community. What impact do you believe both those initiatives will have?
Well, I kind of clearly wanted to focus on the HECS, so wiping the HECS debt. I think that's a really good move, but I would, at the Stronger Smarter Institute, we would kind of ask the more deeper questions about how would those people be selected? Like, what else is there other than the HECS debt? Is it just the wiping of the HECS debt, or are there other supports surrounding that? For example, we've got a program that we're about to launch where we're growing our own Indigenous teachers in STEM, and one of those supports is looking at wiping the HECS debt, but there are a whole lot of other supports around that. So from our point of view, we would like to ask the deeper questions about what does that look like, where are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in on that conversation? Are we talking to people who are leaders in that area about those things that are going to happen? So when Bill Shorten talks about partnership, we're talking about real partnerships with real people, and those people who are the practitioners in this field.
Yeah, so can I just dig into that a bit more? So how would you like to see this HECS initiative rolled out and the support around that?
Yeah, so like I just said before, the HECS that I agree, with it being more than, one of the caveats on it was that the recipients of it would have to stay in the communities for 4 years. I think that's a really good move, but would also like to point out that any good reform takes 6 years. So, we do have these people, these wonderful recipients of this scholarship going into communities. How are they then, what is the infrastructure that's put in place to support those people on the ground so they do carry out that 4 years? And then what Indigenous voices in the community have been, will be asked about what that infrastructure is. And then we would assume that other supports like having mentors in the school, inside school and outside the school, to support. So it's like the whole village brings up or grows up a child. So it's that reflection of everyone's voice in there, and specifically in remote communities, we know that the majority of the population is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. So it's about how is their voice being heard in all of this. And I go again back to what Bill Shorten said: a real partnership and an authentic partnership.
Yeah, so what are some of your ideas around the support that should be provided for those teachers in that setting? What have you got any ideas on exactly what kind of support you're talking about there? Yeah,
well, definitely there needs to be a whole lot of cultural awareness, not just cultural awareness, but some people term it cultural awareness, but we need to look at who are the people that are going in, what do they know and understand about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia, because we know that the education system I grew up in, and I'm in my 50s, definitely wasn't talked about in school, and still to this day. We've just had a wonderful elaborations in science in the Australian curriculum included, but what about the rest of the curriculum? we know that the teachers that we're getting some of them may not have even spoken to an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person. So it's about what happens before or while they're in their university degrees.
Yep.
What subjects should be mandatory, not an elective in their courses. What are they doing? What connections are they having with real Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people before they go up into those communities? So a lot of work needs to be done. Of course, the Stronger Smarter Institute, our core business is working with teachers and doing professional development with teachers all about those types of things, about high expectations, about strength-based solutions, about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student identity. And it's about responsibility for change. So people taking on that. If you're an Australian, you're responsible. You live in Australia. This is the First Nation Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So what are we doing to show that we value and respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? So right down to, if I walked into your classroom, what would I see that would show me that you respect and value the First Nations people?
Yeah, so the Prime Minister in his address made a point of also saying that Indigenous Australians have to be partners in this process, and they have to be consulted to ensure that these initiatives are effective. He's gone ahead with this announcement today about waiving the HEC step for teachers who go to Indigenous communities, very, very remote communities for 4 years. Would you like to see him come to organisations like yours now and discuss how this can be rolled out most effectively?
Absolutely. I definitely think that we're a voice in this arena. We're over 10 years running, specifically for Indigenous education and specifically for teachers. So absolutely, people like us who've got that background, who've got that history, who've got the runs on the board, who have got the leadership and the people. So people in our organisation aren't just on paper teachers or have doctorates and stuff like that. We are classroom practitioners. We've done the work. We've lived the life of being an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person. So definitely getting that type of leadership and that type of voice and seeking that in a real way, a real and authentic way, is definitely what we would say. Step one.
And Liz Kupsch, the other thing that the Prime Minister announced today in terms of policy that I just mentioned before was $200 million to go towards helping, it sounded like, Indigenous kids in secondary schools with scholarships and mentoring and things like that. What do you think of that initiative, and how could that be made to work most effectively?
Yeah, well, like I say, any money that's put towards Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, teachers, or to have better outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students is good. It's really about all the underlying and not the surface. It's really looking at what is the design of the products that are out there. What are these students accessing? Making sure that it's really in-depth and from grassroots and not just surface. And then again, having the people who are the experts, or not really the experts, but the people who've got the background, the practitioners who've come through and lived that life and can speak, and they're not really going just to one or two members of the community. That they're actually really looking for all levels of feedback, right from the ground, right from the bottom. If you've got a principal, you've got a cleaner. Everyone that's involved in that community has a say about how it's going, because they're the people that live in the community. And from our point of view, we'd also like to say these initiatives are good, but we don't want people to think that it's a fallacy to think that all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kids, that the Indigenous population is in remote communities. We need to recognise also that biggest populations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are more in regional and urban populations.
Yeah.
So is that all whole bucket? Is that the only bucket of money we've got? We need to look at all different solutions.
Yeah. Okay, Liz Kupsch from the Stronger Smarter Institute. Thanks so much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.